Usually, when you think about power, you probably picture accumulation, right?
Yeah, definitely, like getting more stuff.
Exactly. You imagine building an empire, uh, acquiring wealth, gathering followers, amassing all this data. It's loud, it's really visible, and it takes up a massive amount of physical and psychological space.
Right. It's a very almost Newtonian way of looking at influence. Like you instinctively equate power with mass and motion. The whole prevailing logic is that the more external variables you control, the more powerful you are.
But consider for a moment what happens when someone plays a game of absolute subtraction. Like what happens when a person becomes so detached, so completely empty of desire, so deeply at peace, that their sheer stillness actually threatens the very fabric of the universe?
It's a wild concept, honestly.
It really is. And today you're looking at a stack of sources that center entirely on this paradox. From ancient allegorical texts to the biography of an actual living spiritual leader, these documents map out the mechanics of renunciation.
And if you're currently, drowning in hustle culture, just constantly bombarded by notifications and that exhausting pressure to optimize every single waking second,
Which is all of us, basically.
right, then you might want to pay close attention to this. Because these sources, they offer a highly tested, almost scientific framework for achieving internal balance. They basically suggest that true, unshakable power lies not in acquiring more things, but in mastering exactly what you are capable of letting go of.
Yes. So we're going to dive right into the sources.
Oh.
And to understand the scale of what letting go actually means here, you really have to look at the anchor point of our deep dive today, which is the allegory of Shwet Muni.
Yeah, the Shwet Muni life it's fascinating because this isn't just a story about some guy who decides to take a quiet weekend yoga retreat.
Yeah.
It begins with a king who is at the absolute zenith of worldly success.
Right. This king has basically won the game, as society defines it anyway. I mean, he has the wealth, the unquestioned authority, physical vitality, this huge, vast kingdom. But then, out of nowhere, he experiences this shattering realization.
And it's a structural realization, right, about the nature of reality itself. He suddenly perceives, with just terrifying clarity, that absolutely everything around him is ephemeral.
Ephemeral. Like it's all going to disappear.
Exactly. His power, his fortress, his wealth, and crucially, his own physical body. It is all bound by time. And because it's bound by time, it's mathematically guaranteed to decay. He realizes that building a core identity on things that are guaranteed to just vanish is, well, it's the ultimate recipe for suffering.
Wait, I have to jump in here. Because, I mean, kings and billionaires have midlife crises all the time, right?
Oh, sure. Constantly.
They realize they're going to die, so they build a hospital or a pyramid, or they try to upload their consciousness to a server in Silicon Valley.
Right. Trying to outsmart the ephemerality.
Exactly. But this king, he doesn't do that at all. He abandons his royal identity completely. He leaves the wealth, the authority, even his own name behind, and he eventually becomes known simply as Shwet Muni, just a nameless seeker, and he physically relocates to the banks of the Godavari River.
Yeah, and the Godavari River setting is deeply intentional in these source texts.
How so?
Well, in a lot of Indian traditions, the physical environment is often utilized as a sort of mirror for the internal state. The banks of the Godavari are described as possessing this specific, intense, energetic resonance. It's an environment that's just highly conducive to transformative sadhana.
Sadhana being like deep spiritual practice.
Right, exactly. So he goes there to meditate on Lord Shiva.
No, when you hear meditate, I feel like it is so easy to just picture sitting quietly for 10 minutes with an app, trying to lower your heart rate before a meeting. But the texts make it super clear that Shwet Muni is not doing, like, corporate breath work to manage stress.
No, not at all. He is meditating to merge. He's focusing on Lord Shiva not as some human-shaped deity floating in the sky, but as the supreme, formless force that exists totally beyond the relentless cycles of creation, preservation, and destruction.
Wow.
Yeah. His meditation transcends external ritual entirely. The texts say his senses quiet down to absolute zero. His mind becomes completely still, and he just ceases to identify with his physical body, treating it merely as a temporary vessel.
And this is where the paradox hits. Because this absolute pristine peace, this total lack of movement or desire, It actually triggers a cosmic alarm bell.
It does. It alerts Yamraj.
Yamraj. Let's talk about him. Because in the Vedic and later Hindu traditions that often overlap with these philosophical allegories, Yamraj is commonly known as the Lord of Death, right?
He is, but his actual job description is much more complex than just the Grim Reaper. He is the keeper of cosmic balance. He's the administrator of dharma and karma. He manages the ledger of action and consequence, basically ensuring the whole cycle of life, death, and rebirth continues to function smoothly.
Like the universe's ultimate accountant.
Pretty much. Every single soul is subject to his jurisdiction because every soul is caught in this web of wanting things, doing things, and then suffering the consequences of those actions.
Okay, so Yamraj is essentially the cosmic IRS. If you have assets, desires, or karmic debts, you are on his ledger. He tracks the thermodynamics of the universe, right?
Yeah.
The heat generated by human action.
I love that analogy. Yes, the karmic heat. But Shwet Muni, through his sheer meditative detachment by the river, he just stops generating heat.
He goes cold.
Exactly. And to understand the gravity of this, you really have to look at how traditions like Jainism view karma, because karma isn't just a conceptual point system where, you do a bad deed and get bad luck.
Right, it's not a metaphor.
No, karma is understood as actual microscopic physical matter. It is the subtle dust that literally clings to your soul when you act with passion or anger or desire.
Right, it's physical, like actual particles.
Yes, it physically binds to the soul. So when Shwet Muni sits by the Godavari River, he isn't just calming his mind, he is engaging in a process to literally burn physical karmic matter off his soul through extreme austerity and stillness. And simultaneously, he's refusing to generate any new desires that would attract new karmic dust.
So he is becoming a singularity of absolute peace.
Precisely.
And for the cosmic IRS agent, a singularity is a huge systemic threat. I mean, you can't audit a person who possesses literally zero karmic matter. The sources say Yamraj actually has to personally investigate this because Shwet Muni's absolute detachment is destabilizing the fundamental rules of the universe.
Right, because the system relies on souls participating in the cycle of action and reaction. If a soul just unplugs completely, the integrity of the whole cosmic order is challenged.
It forces you to completely redefine what power even is. The threat to the universe isn't a warlord conquering continents. The threat is a solitary figure sitting by a river wanting absolutely nothing.
True spiritual power, according to this allegory, isn't about bending the world to your will. It is about achieving an internal awakening so fundamentally true that the external world and even the cosmic deities governing it, they must recalibrate around your stillness.
The universe has to adjust to him. And the ultimate punchline of the myth is that Shiva, the ultimate reality Shwet Muni is meditating upon, remains completely silent when Yamraj raises the alarm.
That silence is the definitive answer. It signifies that true cosmic balance isn't a matter of bureaucratic administration. It is a matter of internal realization. When you locate that absolute truth within yourself, the external administrative rules of the universe simply cease to apply to you.
It is a staggering philosophical concept.
Yeah.
But, it's very easy to look at the story of Shwet Muni, nod along, and dismiss it as just a beautiful ancient myth, like a poetic way to talk about the soul.
Sure.
Except the forces we have today don't just stop at mythology. They present a modern, highly documented equivalent of this exact trajectory, happening right in the 20th and 21st centuries.
The parallels are almost uncanny, really. The texts transition from the allegorical Shwet Muni to the documented life of Acharya Shiv Muniji. And his background, it completely shatters the modern stereotype of someone who just, drops out of society to become a wandering ascetic because they had no other options.
Yeah, he was born Dr. Shiv Kumar on September 18th, 1942 in Malut, Punjab. And he definitely wasn't born into poverty. He was born into an affluent, highly respectable Oswal family. He had every conceivable material advantage you could ask for.
And he didn't just inherit wealth, he possessed immense intellectual capability. I mean, he held 2 master's degrees.
2.
Yeah, one in philosophy from Punjab University in Chandigarh and another in English literature from J.V. Jain College in Saharanpur. This was a man deeply entrenched in the intellectual academic world. He understood the highest echelons of modern thought.
But the texts explicitly point out that all this education couldn't satiate his hunger for truth. In fact, it seems like acquiring higher academic knowledge only intensified his realization of its limits.
Because he recognized the exact same ephemerality that the allegorical king realized. Intellectual wealth, academic prestige, the ability to debate philosophy, it's all just as ephemeral as gold or real estate. You can study the philosophical map of a mountain for a decade in a university library, But reading about a mountain does not mean you have actually felt the cold air at the summit.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. He wanted experiential spiritual knowledge, not just book smarts,
Exactly. So at the age of 30,
which is a massively significant number in this context.
right, because Lord Mahavir, the 24th Tirthankar of Jainism, also renounced his royal life at exactly age 30.
Right, so Dr. Shiv Kumar reaches his own turning point at 30. On May 17, 1972, he takes Diksha under Gyan Muni Ji, becoming Jan Muni Shiv Kumar.
And we really should clarify what taking Disha actually entails, because it is not merely like joining a monastery and putting on a robe. In the Jain tradition, Disha is an initiation of extreme, almost unfathomable austerity.
Right, what actually happens on that day?
Well, the initiate publicly gives up all wealth, severs all ties with their family, and relinquishes their former identity completely. But it's intensely physical, too. Part of the Diksha ceremony involves a ritual called Keshlanch.
And that is,
It's the plucking out of one's own hair by hand.
wait, plucking their own hair, with like pulling it out from the roots.
Yes, handful by handful. It signifies the ultimate renunciation of physical vanity and the full embrace of physical endurance. And from that day forward, they commit to the 5 great vows: absolute nonviolence, truthfulness, non-stealing, celibacy, and complete non-possession.
That is intense.
It gets stricter.
Yeah,
They do not use vehicles, ever. They do not cook food. They rely entirely on gachari.
the carry being alms.
Right, seeking alms by accepting only very small amounts of pure vegetarian food from householders without causing any burden to them.
So you are trading a university classroom and a life of total privilege for a life where you literally walk barefoot across the country, eating only what is placed in your hands. It requires a psychological shift that is frankly staggering to consider from our modern perspective.
But look at the results of that shift. His rise within the Straman Sangh, which is a vast monastic order of over 1,200 monks and nuns, it was meteoric. He was made Yuva Acharya in 1987 after just 15 years as a monk, which is exceptionally fast.
Wow.
And by 1999, he was declared the 4th Acharya, basically the supreme spiritual head of the entire order.
And the physical feats he accomplished while holding this leadership role are just wild. The sources document that he traveled 35,000 kilometers barefoot across India.
35,000.
Punjab, Haryana, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra. I mean, 35,000 kilometers is practically the circumference of the earth. Barefoot, over burning asphalt through monsoons, across unpaved rural roads.
It's a testament to absolute mastery over the physical vessel. But, he wasn't just walking to set an endurance record. Every step was part of his sadhana, his spiritual practice. He was walking to spread a message of peace, maintaining this deeply anchored meditative state amidst all the chaos of the Indian landscape.
Which is incredibly chaotic.
Very. And remarkably, he never abandoned his intellectual rigor. He spent 3 decades deeply researching meditation, eventually earning a D.Litt from Vikramshila University for his thesis, Dhyan Ek Devya Sadhana, which translates to meditation, a divine practice.
That is the part that fascinates me most.
Yep.
He leaves the ivory tower, subjects his body to this extreme asceticism, plucks his hair out, walks across a continent, but still writes a doctoral thesis analyzing the mechanics of his own mind. He bridges peer-reviewed academia with ancient ascetic wisdom.
He really proves that intellectual pursuit and spiritual renunciation are not mutually exclusive when they're applied correctly. But this actually brings us to a crucial tension in the sources. Well, Acharya Shiv Muniji didn't just write esoteric theses for other monks to read in silence. He actively engaged with the deepest flaws of the society he had supposedly renounced.
Yeah, I have to say, I am genuinely confused here. If he went through all that trouble to detach from the world, giving away his wealth, walking barefoot to burn off his karmic matter like Shwetvahan Muni, why does he care if society has a bad marriage system?
It seems counterintuitive, right?
It does. Isn't writing a book about social reform the ultimate worldly attachment? Like, how does a detached monk justify becoming an activist?
It's a brilliant question, and it really cuts to the core of how Jain leaders view the entire ecosystem of consciousness. You have to understand that in this tradition, personal liberation does not exist in a vacuum.
Okay.
You cannot achieve high, sustainable spiritual states if the society surrounding you is fundamentally unjust, unwell, or built on oppression.
So it's almost an environmental issue, like
Yeah.
trying to grow a delicate plant in completely toxic soil.
Precisely. If society is weighed down by ignorance, harmful dogmas, and inequality, the collective spiritual energy is stagnant. And remember, a monk relies on the laity, the householders, for food and shelter through gochari.
Right, they can't cook for themselves.
Exactly. So if the householders are spiritually impoverished or socially oppressed, the entire system collapses.
Hmm.
By reforming society, Acharya Shiv Muniji wasn't reattaching himself to worldly desires. He was cleaning up the spiritual ecosystem so that true seeking became possible for the masses.
Ah, okay. That makes sense. And when you look at the bibliography provided in the Shivmuni Samaj source, the sheer volume and specificity of his reforms are incredible. He's like a modern-day spiritual debugger.
A spiritual debugger, I like that.
Right. He looks at society's operating system, finds the bugs, and writes literal manuals to fix them. Like he wrote a revolutionary text called Parde Kapap, which translates to the sin of the veil.
Yes. This was a direct, really bold critique of the Purdah system, the practice of female seclusion and veiling. He highlighted the deeply negative impacts this had on women's health, their intellectual development, and society as a whole. He was a monk taking a definitive, loud stand for the liberation and visibility of women.
He also wrote a manual translated as Independent Marriage System. He looked at how families were going into massive multi-generational debt just to fund these extravagant, dogmatic wedding rituals.
Right. It was ruining families financially.
So he wrote a guide on how marriages should actually be conducted to foster success and partnership, entirely free from these restrictive, financially ruinous customs.
Furthermore, he made massive contributions to the authentic preservation of yoga. He saw the modern commodification of yoga, stripping it down to mere physical stretching or fitness, and he sought to rescue its spiritual mechanics.
He didn't want it turning into just another gym class.
Exactly. So he wrote detailed Hindi commentaries on Patanjali's Yoga Darshan, specifically the Samadhipad and Satanpad. He wrote Sachitra Yoga Sahan, based on 40 years of his own rigorous practice, and Yoga Vigyan, focusing on the deep scientific elements of the Shwetvahan mantra. He was basically breaking down the mechanics of spiritual elevation so ordinary people could understand and apply them without falling prey to fake gurus.
But if you are writing books to reform a massive society, you need a serious platform, right? You need an architecture that supports that kind of progressive thought. And the sources point out that Acharya Shiv Muniji's platform is rooted in a very specific, historically radical tradition within Jainism.
To really understand that platform, you have to look at the architecture of the Shvetambara and Stanakvasi traditions. As you likely know, Jainism is primarily split into two major sects. The Digambara, or sky-clad tradition, whose advanced ascetics practice absolute nudity,
Right.
and the Shvetambara, or white-clad tradition, who believe full liberation can be achieved while wearing simple white garments.
So Acharya Shiv Muniji is the head of the Shraman Sangh, which falls under the Shvetambara umbrella. But within that Shvetambara side of the family, there was this massive historical schism that led directly to the Stanakvasi sect he leads today. And the story of how that sect was founded in the 15th century is just incredible.
It really is. It centers on a man named Lanka Shah. He lived in Ahmedabad, and crucially, he was not a monk.
He wasn't.
No, he was a wealthy, highly literate merchant. And because of his excellent penmanship and literacy, he was employed to copy the ancient Jain scriptures, the Agams.
Just imagine this guy in a scriptorium, meticulously hand-copying these sacred texts day after day. And as he is reading the foundational source code of his religion, he looks out the window at the reality of how his religion is actually being practiced.
The contrast was stark. The majority sect at the time, the Murtapujak sect, focused heavily on temple rituals and the veneration of elaborately decorated idols. Lanka Shah observed the immense wealth poured into these temples, and more troublingly, he observed the excesses of the yatis.
The yatis.
They were the temple caretakers. They had amassed significant political and financial power, which sometimes led to, corruption and drifting away from ascetic principles.
So he realizes that none of this idol worship or temple bureaucracy is actually in the Agams. The texts he is copying, which outline the original teachings of Lord Mahavir, do not mandate building lavish temples or venerating statues.
Right. This realization sparked a profound internal reformation for him. Lanka Shah began to preach that true Jainism was about internal purification, the strict, microscopic adherence to nonviolence, and the rigorous study of the scriptures. He argued that focusing on external statues was a distraction from the internal work.
And this movement directly evolved into the Stanakvasi tradition.
Exactly. They explicitly reject idol worship. Their ascetics do not reside in temples. They reside in austere, unadorned halls called staniks.
It is a complete democratization of the spiritual path. They basically bypassed the institutional middlemen and went straight back to the foundational text. And what the sources show is that the spirit of continuous text-based reform didn't just end with Lankashah in the 15th century. It became embedded in the DNA of the tradition. Look at the establishment of the Sri Jain Shwetvahan Conference in Philodi in 1902.
Oh, that conference is a prime example of institutionalized modernization. Heavily influenced by the brilliant monk Acharya Vijay Ansuri, the agenda in 1902 wasn't just about theological debates, it was about societal survival and evolution.
They passed resolutions pushing for vernacular education so that ordinary people could actually read the text for themselves, rather than relying on scholars to translate for them.
Right.
They explicitly pushed for the education of youth and women, which was a deeply radical stance for the era. They actively campaigned to end child marriage and those exact same extravagant debt-inducing feasts that Acharya Shiv Muniji would write about decades later.
What you are seeing is a religion built on some of the most ancient, rigorous, seemingly unchanging ascetic vows in human history. Yet it possesses a built-in mechanism for constant social evolution. And that mechanism works because of how leadership is structured.
Explain that, because usually ancient religions are governed by bloodlines or deep political entrenchment, right? Like passing the torch down a family tree.
Right. But look at the Namakar mantra, the foundational Jain prayer that maps out the stages of spiritual elevation. The hierarchy moves from sadhu to upataya to acharya. What is entirely absent from that hierarchy is birthright. You cannot inherit the title of Acharya. You cannot buy it.
You have to actually walk the 35,000 kilometers.
Exactly. Leadership is a pure meritocracy based entirely on demonstrated spiritual education, rigorous self-discipline, and experiential wisdom. Because the leaders, like Acharya Shiv Muniji, are elevated based on their actual, undeniable spiritual attainment, they possess the absolute moral authority required to enact change.
They walk the walk.
Literally. They do. They have the credibility to prune the dead branches of societal dogma while perfectly preserving the ancient living roots of the core philosophy.
And if you strip away the idols, the temples, and the dogma, what are those living roots? Like, what is actually left to hold this entire worldview together?
That brings us to the bedrock of the entire system, the Jain way of life, or Jaywal. Regardless of which sect you belong to, whether you wear white, practice nudity, worship idols, or reject them, every single Jain fundamentally agrees on three core pillars, often referred to as the AAA of Jainism.
Ahimsa, anakanfad, and aparigraha.
Exactly.
Now, since you are likely already familiar with the broad concept of ahimsa, nonviolence, let's get the basic definition and look at how the ancient Jain texts applied it at a microscopic level that is frankly astonishing.
Yes. Thousands of years before the invention of the microscope, Jain scriptures stated definitively that plants possessed vitality and a distinct form of consciousness.
Which is wild.
It is. Modern botany is only now uncovering the complex communication networks, stress responses, and resource-sharing behaviors of plant life. Furthermore, these ancient texts champion the rigorous boiling and filtering of water, not as some arbitrary religious ritual, but explicitly for the prevention of disease.
Because they recognize the existence of microscopic life forms millennia before the germ theory of disease was ever established in Western medicine.
Right. They also possess an incredibly precise understanding of the building blocks of matter. Long before modern physics, the texts described the existence of atoms, which they called paramonu, and molecules, called pudgala. And on a dietary level, they outlined fasting protocols and vegetarian diets that modern medicine is just now validating for their profound benefits on gut health, cellular autophagy, and longevity.
It reveals that ahimsa is not merely a moral suggestion to, be nice. It is an intensely rigorous biological and ecological science. When Lord Mahavir taught that all souls are alike, he was establishing a literal ecological framework.
Exactly. Violence against the environment or violence against animals is quite literally violence against oneself because it degrades your own psychological and spiritual architecture. You're generating that karmic dust.
You cannot poison the river without eventually drinking the water. But as fascinating as the biology of ahimsa is, the second pillar, anakanfad, is the one that feels most urgent for the modern era. Anakanfad translates to non-absolutism, or the multiplicity of perspectives.
It is the epistemological heart of Jainism. It posits that ultimate truth and reality are infinitely complex and multifaceted. Therefore, no single specific human perspective can ever encompass the absolute truth in its entirety.
In a digital world obsessed with being right, where every debate on social media is a zero-sum game of destroy or be destroyed, the idea that completely conflicting perspectives can all hold a piece of truth is vital. It's like It's like trying to understand the global stock market by only looking at the price of bananas in one single grocery store. You are dealing with a hyper-complex, multidimensional system. Anaconfod essentially argues that absolute truth is an algorithm so infinitely complex, our human brains are only capable of processing one single line of code at a time.
That is a phenomenal analogy. If you only see one line of code, you might understand that single line perfectly. But if you assume that one line is the entire operating system, you are living in ignorance. Anakantvod breeds profound intellectual humility. It forces you to realize that your absolute certainty is merely a byproduct of your limited vantage point. Think of the 3D object analogy.
Oh, right. Like if I'm looking at a cylinder from the top down and say, it's a circle, but if you look at it from the side, you say, no, it's a rectangle.
Right. And we are both right, based on our perspective, but we are both incomplete.
That is so good. And the final pillar, aparigraha, brings us full circle back to Shwetvahan Muni, non-possession.
Yes. Aparigrata is the active practice of unhooking your identity from external variables. It is the realization that you do not truly own anything. You are merely interacting with matter temporarily. This is the exact state Shwetvahan Muni achieved on the banks of the Godavari.
To synthesize this entire journey today, you started with the myth of Shwetvahan Muni, a king who found a peace so absolute that it physically threatened the thermodynamics of the cosmic ledger.
Right.
You then saw that myth manifested in reality through Acharya Shiv Muniji, a man who walked away from immense wealth and multiple degrees at age 30, pulled out his hair, and walked 35,000 kilometers barefoot across India.
Yet he utilized his profound meditative detachment to author literal manuals for social reform, fighting for women's rights and marriage equality, proving that true ascetics care deeply about the health of the ecosystem they have renounced.
We track the incredible history of his Thanak tradition, seeing how a merchant named Lanka Shah realized the institutions had strayed from the source code, sparking a wave of continuous modernization that carried through to the 1902 Philodi Conference.
And finally, you saw how the ancient foundational pillars of Ahimsa, Anakanthvad, and Aparigraha provide a scientifically validated blueprint for navigating existence. Whether you are a monk taking monastic vows or a professional trying to survive the modern economy, the core lesson is about recognizing ephemerality.
True personal independence relies heavily on understanding your inescapable ecological and societal interdependence. The texts call the ultimate state of liberation becoming a nirgrath, one who is entirely detached, literally without knots.
Without knots.
Beautiful.
Before you go, consider this final thought. We discussed how Jainism views karma not as a concept, but as actual physical matter that attaches to a soul based on the intent and passion of its actions. Yamaraj tracks this thermodynamic heat on his ledger. But apply that ancient physics to our modern world. How does a universe's karma ledger process a modern corporation? Oh, that's interesting.
Right. If a multinational company pollutes a river, or an algorithmic social media platform actively generates societal rage to increase engagement, where does that physical karmic matter attach? Does it attach to the CEO, to the shareholders, to the AI that optimized the code?
That's a complex ledger.
It is. If you are a passive participant or a consumer in a deeply harmful system, are you absorbing a fraction of its karmic dust? Shwetvahan Muni unplugged from the system entirely to avoid this dust. If you cannot unplug, how do you manage the invisible ledger you are interacting with every single day?
Something to really think about.
Definitely. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.